Welcome, writers, readers, and friends to the Authors Talking Bookish podcast. I'm Donna Norman Carbone, author of All That Is Sacred.
And I'm Hope Gibbs, author of Where the Grass Grows Blue.
We're two debut writers traditionally published by a small publishing house, bringing to you all the experiences that we as authors learn the hard way, so you don't have to.
We'll give you insights from the inception of a book idea to publication and beyond. And along the way, we'll share our love of books from the writer's perspective.
Hello, friends. Welcome back. This is episode 26, and we are thrilled today because we get to interview an author, a podcaster, and an editor, Maggie Smith. I'm Donna Carbone, and I'm joined by Hope Gibbs. Hi, Hope. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Donna?
I'm great. Loving summer.
I was about to say, this is probably one of your favorite times of the year because you can focus on your writing and you get to go to the Cape.
Yeah, I'm officially on summer break and it feels good.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited today because the author we're going to speak with, as you say, she has so many hats and she is an award-winning author. And so I'm going to bring her on in. Let's introduce Maggie Smith. Maggie, hello. How are you?
I'm good. I'm enjoying summer too.
Well, we are so excited to have you here. And before we start, talking about your books and your podcast, I'd like to give everyone a little bit about your background. So, influenced by her former career path as a psychologist and business owner, author Maggie Smith pens compelling stories of ordinary women who face extraordinary challenges with grit, brain power, and strong doses of empathy and humor. She hosts the podcast Hear Us Roar and is a managing editor of the Right City magazine. She is the award-winning author of Truth and Other Lies and her new book, Blind Spot.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's only like 2 weeks old, so I feel like it's still my little baby.
Your new baby, your newborn.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about your newest novel?
Sure. Blind Spot is a psychological suspense, and it features an ambitious district attorney living here in Milwaukee who is hunting down a stalker that is threatening her and her teenage daughter, only to wind up arrested for murder when he turns up dead. So we know in the first page or two that she's up for a murder charge. We don't know who was stalking her. And more importantly, we don't know who might have been framing her for the murder. So those are both kind of questions going on. And in between there, this is my old women's fiction genre coming out. There is a mother and daughter love story. So I call it a mother and daughter love story wrapped inside a suspense novel.
Oh, that's neat.
I love that. A few months ago, Maggie, because I follow you on social media, you made a comment about how you pitched this book as a gender flipped presumed innocence. And I started that miniseries today.
I did too, last night.
Yeah, and I was so excited because it was one of my favorite movies. I love the movie. And so you were the one who got me excited about that. So I can't wait to read Blind Spot.
Great. Wonderful. It's quite a bit different. I mean, Scott Turow is an excellent writer, and I certainly don't want to compare my writing style to his, but certainly the plot of a assistant district attorney very much involved in the law and keeping the law and prosecuting bad guys, being arrested and framed for murder or possibly framed for murder. Who knows? Maybe they've changed the story this time and he's the one that did the murder. But my lady did not do the murder. So
how much research did you have to put into this book, Maggie?
Some, obviously. I'm not a lawyer, so I talk to lawyers. I talk to people in the district attorney's office. I also went to something that was real fun last summer called Cop Camp. There were only like 10 or 15 writers together, and we went through 2 or 3 days of being at a police academy and learning how to make fingerprints. And we went to a crime scene that was a real life motel and had a crime scene set up in one of the rooms, and we had to observe the clues and figure out what had happened. And we did blood splatter, and so that was real fun. I didn't use all of it in the novel, but it was a good atmospheric kind of thing to get involved in what the police go through.
That's awesome. I would
That
never even
is.
think to look for something like that.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. And this book has been getting great reviews, like this one. This was on Amazon, and it says, if you like twisty mysteries with a thrilling edge, you will love Maggie Smith's latest novel, Blind Spot. The murder mystery keeps readers on their toes throughout. And another thing I love about this is the cover. The cover is fantastic. So tell us a little bit about what it's like to get a review like that, and then maybe give us a little insight on how the cover came about.
Well, I've been blown away by the reviews. I mean, I think it's pretty much staying at about 4.7 out of 5 on Goodreads. Even
Mm.
with, I've had a three review, and I got a 2-star review this week, but also that's offset by like the 75-star reviews. And a lot of the readers are people that are pretty savvy about this suspense genre. They read a lot in it, and so it takes a lot to surprise them and to make them feel like, oh, this is really a surprising, twisty kind of thing. And that was my goal. I read Agatha Christie when I was a teenager. I read the entire canon, I think, in one summer, and looked around and went, what do you mean she's dead? No more? And I've always wanted to write this kind of thing. And when I came up with the concept and then the extra twist at the end, I thought, ooh, that interests me. I think that might interest other people. So, and my writing style is fairly fast paced. It was in Truth and Other Lies, which was more of a women's suspense, a women's fiction novel. So this was really kind of fun to write. I liked hiding the clues and figuring out a way to put the clues in where I didn't draw attention to them, hidden in plain sight kind of thing. So I apparently succeeded. People are saying that they were really surprised. And as to the cover, I kind of designed it myself. This is an indie published book. I decided that I wanted to kind of be in control of when it came out, how it got released, make more money on the sales, and just have the experience of I'm kind of an entrepreneur at heart. I owned my own company before I was a writer, and so I'm kind of a control freak, and I like knowing all the details and stuff. So I kind of designed the cover myself. I looked at the genre. This is a fairly common color scheme of the genre. It's either usually red and black or it's the gold and blue. So that kind of signifies the genre when you just put the cover up. And I searched around I come from kind of an art background. I sold art for a lot of years. And so I have kind of an eye. I'm not an artist, but I can have an eye for it. And so I then hired a cover designer and said, make it kind of look like this idea that I had. So it's been pretty successful, I think.
I have to ask you because I read your other book, Truth and Other Lies, and that was my favorite cover of the year. I absolutely love this cover. Did you have any input in that cover as well?
Yes, lots. I was with a small press, 1016 press, that is here in Wisconsin in my backyard. And I worked with the cover designer very specifically. I found the scarves on like Shutterstock or something, and kind of I was looking for something that was somewhat abstract, but would also kind of telegraph women and have three, because there is a mentor and her young reporter that she mentors, and that reporter's mother. So it's centered on three women, and I wanted them kind of woven together. So that was the idea behind it. And between the cover designer taking that idea and taking the scarves as the visual and blending it together, we kind of worked on it together. And thank you for the compliment.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's an award-winning book. You won several awards with this book, and with this, hats off to Maggie Smith for this debut. Besides having one of the most evocative covers to come out this year, Her novel stands up. I didn't want to put it down. So, you've got great reviews with that. So tell us the difference between your debut novel and coming out with your second book. How was that different for you?
Well, my first book has no murders, and this one has two. There, in some ways, there's a lot of similarities because there was a mother and daughter story, strong story, in Truth and Other Lies, and in this one as well. And they both have kind of a central woman character. In the first one, it's written from a first person point of view, and it's the 25-year-old reporter. So it's a much younger protagonist than it is in the second book, where that woman is the 40-year-old mother, in effect. And I think the first one was me teaching myself to write also. I'm glad it won a lot of awards, but it was written like 3 different times with 3 different plots. It had the 3 roles, the mother, her daughter, and the mentor, but they were in a totally different plot when I wrote the other 2. They were in one, I remember at least, the mother was searching for her birth mother, and there was an illegitimate child and a baby that was taken through the Catholic Church. I mean, it was totally different than what it turned into being, which was more of journalistic ethics and fake news and that kind of thing, and stealing stories. And so it was really something that I was cutting my teeth on learning how to write. And writing a novel, as both of you know, is really one of the hardest things you do in life. It's such a juggling act. And people don't know that till they're right in the middle of it. And then it's too hard to give up. But you kind of keep going and saying, this is really hard, isn't it? You're turning to other people and they're all nodding their head. So that was me teaching myself to write. And I discovered that I need an outline. I can't just be a seat of the pants person, because I just am someone that doesn't like to waste time. And I wasted an awful lot of time writing that first book. It turned out to be good, but it did take a long time. This one was a much shorter process. I wrote half of it during Nano, and then I wrote the other half in the next 6 months. So maybe all told about a year, where the other one took probably 4 years by the time I wrote it 3 times. So I think I'm getting better at it. Hopefully that's the goal, that you get better every time. Next book, I think I'm going to attempt a 2-person point of view, which I've only had 1-person point of view in both these. And this one was a lot easier. I think it was more fun to write because I'm kind of a fan of the genre, and a lot of books I read are in this genre. So I think I was more comfortable with it than maybe the first genre. So I don't know.
Who are some of your favorite authors in this genre?
Oh, gee, now I have to leave out people. I'll tell you some of the 3 books that I recommend in this genre, and they're not all current books. One is I Let You Go by Claire McIntosh, and it is her debut novel. And she's an English writer, and a lot of the writers I really gravitate to are women, and a lot of them seem to be British. Ruth Ware, Tanya French. But Claire McIntosh, I Let You Go, was one of the ones that I read, and I got to page 75, which those of you that are writers know is kind of the first act. And she did a complete reversal, so much so that I thought, I'm going to have to read those 75 pages over again. And before I went further, I just went back and read them to see how she did that, because I was so flabbergasted. The second one, I don't even know if this is a woman. It's Renee Knight, Knight. It's called Disclaimer. I think it's about 10 years old. And the setup is a woman wakes up in bed with her husband, wakes up in the morning. There's a book on her nightstand that she's never seen before. And she opens it up, and it is featuring her own life is the novel.
Wow.
So I'll not tell you any much more about it than that, but it's very kind of and it turns into something totally different than you think it's going to be. And the third one is by a male author, Chris Pavone, and it's 2 Nights in Lisbon. It came out about 2 years ago, and it ostensibly is about a woman newly married, goes on a honeymoon to Portugal with her husband, also for a business trip. And he leaves in the morning and then he never comes back. And then she gets a kidnap ransom note. And you think it's a kidnapping story. And then about halfway through, you realize it's a totally different story than you thought.
Huh.
It flips on its head all in every way. So it was really a great book to read too. So all three of those are my go-tos for people. They're all really different and they're not the big names. I read the Ruth Weirs and the Megan Mirandas and the Mary Kubicas and all those people. But these are three people that kind of are in left field a little bit and have great, at least this one book is a great book.
Yeah. Well, before we go on to talk about the other roles that you have in your life, you're a writer, you're a podcaster. Donna and I were talking right before we came on with you about women's fiction. And I know Donna has a question about it because you write two different genres. You've written women's fiction and now you're more suspense. Donna, do you want to ask her that question that we were discussing
Yeah,
earlier?
I just I kind of wanted to know what you think about the label. As a member of the WFWA, as both Hope and I are, we talked about the obscurity of the women's fiction genre as a label. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think it's so obscure. I think it's very inclusive
Yeah.
because, historical fiction fits there. Even some what might be more lighthearted women's fiction fits there. Issue-driven things fit there. Sometimes vaguely thin memoirs that are written as fiction fit there. I mean, I kind of think that it's really pretty flexible. And I hate to see the term go away, but because I think we don't have a really good term for a replacement.
Right.
But people are starting to call it upmarket fiction and book club fiction are the two that I hear the most. And that probably makes some sense. But I kind of embrace the women's fiction. I think those people that use it kind of know what we mean when we say that. And more the industry people like Publishers Weekly and agents that are saying, oh, well, we're not going to use that term anymore. But readers seem to kind of know what we mean by that. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah, in a industry where we really have to define clearly who our audience is, I think that term is helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Let's pivot to your podcast. So you have this podcast called Hear Us Roar for novelists from the Women's Fiction Writers Association, discussing not only the inspiration behind their book, but also insights into their writing process, the best advice they ever got, and the joys and pitfalls they've encountered along the way. So talk to us. How did you come to become a podcast host?
Oh, I raised my hand. It's an all volunteer organization. So when I suggested that we do the podcast, I think one of the board members said, "Is your hand raised?" Sure, why not? I mean, I started it about 5 or 6 years ago, so now we've got 240 episodes under our belt, and I just really thought it would be fun to do, and I was an ex-psychologist, so I'm used to talking to people. I'm pretty outgoing, and I'm a good listener. I'm talking a lot today, but usually I'm listening more on the podcast, and like you two are doing. And so I thought it would be a nice thing to add. And initially it was really just for the organization. And as the organization grew, and then we wanted to do outreach where we were more known in the wider publishing world, then we started opening up the podcast, not to guests, it's still just members of the association, but being on Apple Podcast and Spotify and other outlets where people would find out about us a little bit more. And boy, the breadth of people, we were talking about how all-inclusive women's fiction is, the breadth of the guests have really taught me. When I did my debut, I felt like I had an MFA from just listening to these people. I do this every week, and it's 30 minutes of listening to all different authors. And they were all sharing different stories to get to publication, different stories of how their inspiration came about, their writing tips. So I felt like I was just kind of absorbing all of that. And when it came time to do my debut, I felt like I knew a lot more than I would have if I hadn't been the host of this show, and it's really a win-win-win. It's a win for me. I built my platform where a lot of people know about me from the show, helping obviously the authors that are on, helping the organization in their outreach things. So yeah, it's been a gold mine. And
Yeah.
every week I go downstairs after the podcast and say to my husband, I just met the most interesting person. He says, you say that every week, but they are all so interesting. They all have stories to tell. I guess everybody has a story to tell, but I
Yeah.
give them 30 minutes to tell it.
Well, I
What
will say,
about
oh,
okay.
sorry. Go ahead, Donna.
I was going to ask about your magazine that you're an editor for.
Well,
Is
I am fairly close to Chicago. I live in Milwaukee,
yeah.
and I joined the Chicago Writers Association and had gone to their conference and met people there. And one of the women I met was the editor before, managing editor. I have 3 associate editors and a poetry editor as well underneath me. It's all volunteer again, and she was wanting to resign and do something else, and so she asked me if I'd like to do this, and it's a curating process. I mean, it's just a little bit like an agent might. We get we publish short stories and poems,
Mhm.
and so we get both those coming from. It's open worldwide. We get people from other countries
Oh, wow.
submitting things as well. We pay a slight amount of money,
Mhm.
and so it's not just members of the association. And we publish. I've started publishing every week.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's every other week. We publish other things like we have a book of the year contest and we have a first chapter contest through the Chicago Writers, and we publish those excerpts as well. And then about every 2 or 3 years, we publish an anthology that's actually printed, and we go back and look at the people that have been published in the e-magazine online, and we
Mhm.
pick and choose the best of those and put them together into an anthology that is for sale.
Oh,
So
neat.
it's a way to read a lot of stuff. We read stuff. We probably only accept about 10% of what gets
Mhm.
submitted to us, and then the poetry editor reads the poems and
Mhm.
judges those. So it's been a way to give back to the community and also read a lot of interesting, more short stories, which I don't typically read. So this is a way that I can stay in touch with that genre as well.
Well, so you
Neat.
have 3 distinct roles. You are an
I
author,
feel like I need
and
to do the little hat.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and you're a podcaster, and then you also have the magazine. How do you find the time to take care of each role, and where do you write? What is your process like?
Well, I do this full time. I don't have another outside job. I am kind of retired. I sold the company that I owned in the art business a few years ago, and that's when I became a full time writer. So I do have, and I don't have kids, little kids. They're all grown. Um, so I have full time. I feel pretty lazy sometimes. The podcast doesn't take that long. I mean, it probably takes 2 hours a week. The magazine, probably the same. And between writing and marketing the book, I probably spend, like right now, I'm in marketing mode because this book, Blind Spot, just came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I'm much more giving talks, doing Zoom calls, writing interviews, writing essays, um, placing ads, things like that, doing posting on social media. Um, when I am writing, I spend a lot of time noodling around before I start writing. So right now I'm in the noodling phase uh, and I have kind of a vague outline of what it's about. It's a kidnapping story, and that came about because my daughter is 25 and she is traveling the country in a renovated school bus with her new husband from 2 or 3 years ago and a couple of dogs. And they are moving from place to place. Right now, they're in the Pacific Northwest. And it came about because she had a post on Instagram, which is where we keep track of where she is. She doesn't write us as much as she writes Instagram, and then we watch what she's doing. Um, and she was down in Mexico, which we didn't know she was there for a long weekend. And she said, "Oh, the hotel told us to stay near campus, but oh, poo poo, we're adventurers, and we are now in the jungles outside." And I thought, my first thought is is that safe? And probably it isn't safe. And what if you got kidnapped? And that was kind of the impetus for this. And when I was at cop camp, we had someone talking about the cartels moving into California and growing vast fields of marijuana, and how he was a like a forest ranger a little bit, and he said we're having to carry guns now because we run into people dressed in camouflage with machine guns to keep us away from this property. So I thought, well, that's going on even in the United States. So I am putting those ideas together, of her getting kidnapped kind of inadvertently or maybe not inadvertently, and me being the mom back in home base, being asked to pay ransom, and I'm just exploring all those ideas. And so I watch movies and I read books, and when I come up with an idea, I have a little notebook I'm carrying around everywhere, and I write down ideas. And soon I'll be putting the tent poles together. I'll put some, 4 or 5 tent poles of the plot. I use kind of the Save the Cat outline, and
Love that.
then I'll start filling in the scenes after that. So
Mm.
I like to have that somewhat. I know where I'm going, and I know this will be. It's kind of an amalgam of the first and second book, in that there will be suspense, but it's not as much of a murder mystery as it's a kidnapping. Some suspense in that standpoint, and there is a bad guy behind it, and I know who that is, but I'm going to try and hide who that is going on. So there's a blend of women's fiction and suspense in it as well. That's the beauty about being an indie publisher. I can write what I want, and I don't have to have an agent say it's okay or a publisher say it's okay.
So you're happy with being your own boss, being in
I
control
kind
of
of
all of
am.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I went the agent route.
Mhm.
I actually thought Blind Spot would just get zapped up. I thought
Mm.
suspense is a hot topic. Lots of people read it. This is very well written. I mean, I thought it was better than my first book, and that had won all kinds of awards. So
Mm.
I thought, this is a really good book, independent of the fact that I wrote it.
Mm.
And I thought it would get, and I have a pretty big platform through the podcast and other activities. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to write the first 5 agents I write. Somebody will
Mm.
make me an offer. And that didn't happen.
Mm.
And after the 50th, not hearing from them or actively rejecting them, I
Mm.
thought, well, okay, that's not going to work. And I had a small publisher. I could have gone back to the same small publisher that I did, but I just thought maybe I would indie publish. And I had met some of the people in WFWA that indie publish,
Mhm.
and they kind of seemed pretty happy. So I thought, oh, maybe I could do this. It's a challenge. It's something new to learn. So, and I didn't like not knowing when people would say what you said. How's the book doing? When
Yeah.
we're with a small press, it's like, well, I don't know. In 6 months, when I get my royalty check, I'll tell
Right.
you how I'm doing. I have no
Right.
idea. So it's hard to market when you don't have the feedback.
Mm.
Yeah.
You are the only other author that I've ever heard use the term noodling. My former poetry professor, when I went to get my master's degree, used to use that term, and I've never heard it again.
Really? I'm
Yeah,
from the
I
South.
use
I'm
it.
from
I use
Oklahoma.
it,
Maybe,
but yeah,
yeah, brainstorming would be
yeah,
probably the more acceptable term.
yeah.
But brainstorming acts like you're doing it actively. You're sitting down and writing right then. And noodling is just
Right.
kind of out for a walk.
Just kind of
Oh, what
stirring the
about that? And
yeah.
you're writing down ideas that some of them aren't going to work. And I have, my first book was set in Chicago. This one is set in Milwaukee. I live in this area. One of the things I'm thinking is, well, why don't we set this someplace else? I'm
Hmm.
thinking of Napa Valley because
Oh,
I
fun.
have
I like
been
that.
there, and it's interesting. And the mother could own a vineyard or something like,
Well,
you want to make it kind of larger than life.
the research for that would be fun.
Yes, go back. Drink more
Count me in. I'll be
You
happy
need
to
a
go with you. So.
right.
Well, this has been wonderful, Maggie. We so appreciate, and we could sit here and talk to you all day, but we
I
always
know
try to
it
keep
just goes by like a flash. Yeah.
Yeah.
it flies by, and there's so many things I still want to ask, but we try to keep it to 30 minutes. But I would love to know how people can get in, stay in touch with you, how they can maybe follow you on Instagram. Where can they find you?
I'm primarily on Instagram. I probably post every day, and I'm there as Maggie Smith Writes, WRITES. because I actually had Writer, and then I lost that account and can't remember the password, and they won't let me in. So somebody already owns that, and it's me, but I can't get to it. So Maggie Smith Writes at Instagram. I'm on Facebook, but more in individual groups, psychological suspense and novel writing and WFWA and Wisconsin Writers. My website is the one that you flashed up there. And from there, you can sign up for my newsletter. I send a newsletter out every month. And I feature things about my writing journey. I try and be very authentic about what I'm going through and challenges. And I feature other people's books. I make book recommendations and movie recommendations. I'm a big film buff, so I'm often, recommending things I've seen as well. So that would be the place to meet me. And if you're in Wisconsin, I might be appearing at your library and I also do book clubs, and I zoom into book clubs if they're not convenient for me to drive to. I'm more than happy to. It's fun to be at book clubs because they've read the book, and particularly in this one, it's hard to talk about suspense books without giving anything away. And so it's really a treat when people have read it and they can say, well, how did you think about this character or whatever? So.
Well, again, Maggie, thank you so much. And Donna, could you tell everyone what is our next episode?
So our next episode is from book writer to bookkeeper, creating a budget for writers.
Okay. And as
Maggie,
always,
so
you guys can find us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, YouTube. And this has been, again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Maggie, for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
It's been great chatting with you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Hope Gibbs.
And I'm Donna Norman Carbone. It's time for you to get to work.
We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks with another tip from your author friends.